I'm here on the job site with Dale, who's a framing contractor.
Hey, good morning.
Dale traded up to Geico Commercial Auto Insurance for all his business vehicles. We're here where he needs us most.
Yep, they sure are.
We make it easy for him to save on all his insurance needs, all in one place, with coverage that fits his business and bottom line. Oh, I shouldn't have looked down.
It's all right.
We're so far up here.
Look at me. Take a deep breath.
No, I'm good. So good.
Get a commercial auto insurance quote today at geico.com and see how much you could save. It feels good to Geico.
Hey, Howard.
In case you need a lawyer, here's my business card. I'm attorney Howard Ankin.
Oh, hey, Howard.
If you or someone you know has been hurt at work, Ankin Law can get the medical bills paid, the lost wages reimbursed,
Oh, hey, Howard.
and the compensation you deserve.
Hey, Howard.
We're one of the largest filers throughout the state of Illinois of workers' compensation claims. We're here to help. Call 312-6-million. Injury law made personal, that's Ankin Law.
From your favorite source for Chicago White Sox talk, delivering news, interviews, analysis, and more. This is the Sox Machine Podcast with your hosts, Jim Margalus, James Fegan, and Josh Nelson.
Thanks, Rob, and welcome to a new episode of the Sox Machine Podcast. I'm your host, Josh Nelson, and it's Sunday night, April 26th, 2026, as we record this new show. So after going 4-2 on the road to Sacramento and Arizona, and then winning Friday night in come-from-behind fashion, Munetaka Murakami hitting his 11th home run of the season, the White Sox lost on Saturday and Sunday in 10 innings against the Washington Nationals, and thus losing another home series. After sweeping the Toronto Blue Jays at home, the White Sox have lost 8 of their last 9 home games. And now Mike Trout is coming into town for 3 games. In this episode, we'll recap the news from the series with James Fegan, and later we'll recap the first month of the 2026 season with Jim Margalus, as the White Sox are 11-17 after a month's play, but only 3.5 games back of first place and a game behind Minnesota for third place in the American League Central. First, we start with General Manager Chris Getz speaking to the media prior to the series starting. Obviously, a lot of attention being paid to Munetaka Murakami. Signing the Japanese slugger continues to look like a better decision by Getz, and he likes how Murakami generates offensive opportunities with each plate appearance.
Creates plenty of action. He does, and the action is either with his bat or when he doesn't swing and he takes walks. So, that level of patience and threat at the plate, potentially brings more opportunities for other guys that are coming up to the plate with him on base. And just RBI opportunities, things like that. But that patience can have an effect, and you when you're in a lineup, when you're a hitter and you're watching someone having success like Mune is having right now, you take note on why he's having success. And not everyone has the power that Mune has, but that patience, that the ability to take pitches that are not strikes or pitches that you cannot do damage with, and that's really something that we stress. But when you have a player that is exemplifying that on a regular basis, that can have influence on others as well and how they take their at-bats.
The expectation was that Murakami would have some type of learning curve against Major League Baseball pitching, and in a way he's still learning when you look at the strikeout rate. But Getz thinks with Murakami's work ethic, that trend could slow down or reverse.
He's got some natural ability. He's got an engine that is, he's got gifted power, but it also, it's combined with the work ethic that is, top of the scale. I mean, he's a guy that not only pays attention, but you look at his work on the field, both defensively, his base running, studying, video and how pitchers are going to attack him. His understanding of his own craft is something that he prioritizes. So you've got work ethic and skill, and that's a great recipe for success in this game.
Lately, both on social media and the Sox Machine comment section, there's been the conversation of the White Sox signing Murakami to a new contract. Chris Getz wants to slow down that idea.
I don't know. Obviously, he's gone out there and performed really well quickly in his White Sox career. Our goal, from the beginning is making sure that he can just go out there, be comfortable, be himself, knowing that if he can get comfortable, he can be a productive major league player. So certainly don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but what he's done so far has been really impressive. Naturally, you look at that. Anyone that's wearing a White Sox uniform, okay, is this someone that we want here? Do we feel like this is someone that's going to be productive for a long time? And age is certainly a factor. That's just part of the equation when you're putting together a team, both in the short term and long term. So, but it's still, more than anything, we're happy where he's at right now, and he seems to be very comfortable.
The White Sox are still waiting for Kyle Teel to overcome his hamstring injury, and it's looking like his return for sure is being pushed back into May.
Yeah, Teel, he's still doing well. We haven't quite been able to get it to the finish line. There's always this, final stage and threshold that needs to be met before we send someone else on a rehab. We want to be very careful when it comes to Kyle Teel and certainly a hamstring. So I know that he had a really good day yesterday and he feels good today. So we'll see how this weekend goes and take it from there. Been out for a while now. He missed a chunk of spring training, obviously all of the regular season so far. So, you want some at-bats. You want him to experience the different nuances that exist in every game. So both behind the plate, base running, and certainly the at-bats as well. So I don't have a finite number on the amount of at-bats or amount of games. It's one of those, you kind of read the situation, take his feedback, take coach's feedback, and take it from there.
Tanner McDougal is also dealing with a hamstring injury. Getz provided an update on the young flamethrower.
Yeah, he had a little bit of hamstring tightness when he was covering first base. There weren't too many concerns with the strength testing, and today there was a little bit of soreness. We're going to alter, some of his in-between start work, but as of right now, he's planning on making his scheduled start.
Getz also talked about the league in general to gauge how his White Sox team is faring against the competition league-wide, taking that information and deciding in what areas the team as a whole needs to improve upon.
Always pay attention, and beyond just the American League, just the league in general. The teams that defense has become a high priority, contact, just contact in general, let alone in the zone or outside of the zone, and not chasing. And then, building teams with more speed than I think it's been in years past. So, I'd say that's a league trend more so than just the American League. How the teams that we're facing and the approaches that our pitchers need to take, and the small details that pop up during the game. You look at safety squeezes and the offensive approaches of some of these teams, and we've had discussion on how to defend the safety squeeze, which is a difficult play to defend in general, but pitchers making quality decisions on whether to throw home or to first base, what are the pace of the baseball when it's coming off the bat, the direction, and how to handle that. So those are conversations that we seem to be having more frequently now than we have in years past. That's certainly something that has shown itself. The way that bullpens are being built, you kind of sense the trend of different arms taking the late innings. You're seeing that more now than I think you have in years past as well, with not having just a one closer or one setup guy. So not anything much different than how we're approaching things, but those are certainly some trends that have shown up.
Now, the Chicago White Sox did make a roster move over the weekend by DFA'ing catcher Reese McGuire and then calling up Drew Romo to take his spot. White Sox manager Will Venable explained what the thought process of that decision-making was.
Well, Reese was great here, what he meant to the clubhouse, complete pro, really good with the game planning stuff. We just haven't got a lot of production out of the catching spot. Drew's been doing a really good job offensively and defensively down there, and just want to see if we can get some more production out of that spot, see if that tandem can do something to push Caro to just get us some more offense from that spot. So we'll see how it looks. And, Drew made a really strong impression in spring training, specifically with his defense and his game calling, his ability to communicate with pitchers and coaches.
There's some speculation that Romo would be a better suited backup for Kyle Teel instead of carrying two left-handed hitting catchers. But Venable insists that this decision to call up Romo is independent from planning on Teel returning.
I think it's really independent of Kyle. I just think that, we're sitting here almost a month into the season and really haven't got a ton out of that spot. And so I think as we're continuing to find ways to improve and continuing to find ways to improve our roster, that, taking a look at that position specifically and finding a way to, at least explore a potential upgrade, I think is an important thing to do.
Big thanks to our sponsor, BetterHelp, for partnering with us for this important conversation about mental health.
This is Steve Smith here, former NFL wide receiver and host of the 89 show on YouTube. So having a counselor and working with BetterHelp, that gives you an opportunity to really start to unpack, but people don't understand when you unpack things, you also open up a box that you're not always sure what's inside. So I think that's why seeing a professional is extremely important. If you need someone to open up to, visit BetterHelp. That's betterhelp.com/89 to get started.
Let's learn more about what transpired at Wright Field this weekend. Joining me as Sox Machine's beat reporter, it's James Fegan. And James, tough series loss for the White Sox. The last two games went into extra innings, but they have now lost 8 of their last 9 home games. In your opinion, what was the leading cause for this weekend's series loss to Washington?
I have to give it up to you. Apparently, this is a homer-dependent offense. As we put today, they scored 1 run today. They probably didn't knock their Guillen number down too much, but they were the only team with more than 50% of their runs coming via the long ball, and they didn't hit any long balls the last 2 days. The conditions, especially Sunday, were not conducive to them, but they don't want to be a homer-dependent offense. They want to be this team that can, put the ball in play or manufacture runs outside a long ball. But right now, they're not very good at doing that. So when they're not hitting the ball out of the yard, when you're not seeing Murakami and Vargas and Montgomery go deep, they are a bit inept in terms of producing. But also, there were 2 lefty starters, or at least there were 2 lefty starters this weekend. This offense, especially with Austin Hayes out, especially with Edgar Caro not, up to what he's been against left-handers in the past. Derek Hill, Tanner Murray are kind of what's rounding out the back end of that lineup. Luis Angel Acuna. It kind of is like half of a real attack right now. Once you get past that, top 5 the White Sox hitters, they're not really developing a lot of threats. So it's health. It's definitely a lot more swing and miss than they can really sustain to be effective. And turns out bunting with the runner back at third base, while it's still encouraged, has yet to be shown to be a really radical element outside of guys making their major league debut throwing the ball into right field a little bit. So injury, kind of projects in terms of Edgar Caro kind of driving fastballs more, which was his goal in the offseason, or Luis Angel Acuna hitting the ball in the air. He had had one solid contact on Sunday that stuck out. It was an F8 at the end of the day, but not having that up in order. Ideally Hayes is coming back, though maybe rushing back because Tanner Murray just sustained an injury. Maybe those are answers a little bit, but I think against lefty starters they're probably going to be a bit weaker, all season long until something really develops on that front.
You mentioned Tanner Murray. He made a fantastic diving catch, but he got himself up and was clearly in a lot of pain. What's the latest injury status on Tanner Murray, James?
They didn't really give us anything. They said he's still being evaluated, but the Venable mentioned him being in a lot of pain. Everything about it looks like an IL stint en route, and with Austin Hayes already on his rehab assignment, that would be the easier, less frictiony way to address it. Hayes played 5 innings of defense on Sunday, which I think was probably his first time on the field. Probably not ideal to rush him back up before he's played a full game of defense. It's also probably not ideal to have to make a 40-man roster move for for Murray if Hayes is coming back in a matter of days. So I'd lean towards thinking they would just bring Hayes back up, but we'll see.
All right.
They are kind of, if they're not bringing that someone back up to where they're at with health, you're kind of making a 40-man move every single time you have to need any positional reinforcement, and that gets old quick. But racing towards 2024 totals in terms of players used already this season.
So one of those 40-man roster moves, and I think this caught a lot of people by surprise, is that the Chicago White Sox DFA'd backup catcher Reese McGuire, and they promoted Drew Romo to the roster. Now, we heard from Will Venable earlier in this podcast, James, and Venable explained the decision-making on why the White Sox made this swap. But with you looking into it a little bit more and the lack of production from the catcher spot, especially offensively for the White Sox, to me, this seems like a desperate attempt to force something to happen offensively for the White Sox. What do you make of this swap for the White Sox, removing McGuire for Romo?
It's a little like changing tires on a car with a busted transmission, because you're swapping out the backups when really like the starters are the issue. So to speak. Like, it's in terms of like narrative consistency about what they talk from the position standpoint and the reason they gave for like McGuire coming on, it's a little bit like, well, what did you think was going to happen? Because McGuire's come in, his framing's been solid, but he hasn't hit, and his pop times are fine. He's like 196, like it's average, not good, but it's not like, oh, this guy will never throw out a base stealer, but he's 0 for 15. So you can kind of point and say like, hey, we're not getting production. Let's just give the guy who's hot at AAA a chance. You'd think that Romo would get some sort of chance at some point in this depth spot. And at the same time, the reason your catchers are bottom of the league in production is because Caro is having an awful start and Kyle Teel is hurt. And they're not bucking on Caro getting the primary playing time, because like this is still a rebuilding season, saying like, oh, it's late April, we're not getting enough production from the catching position, let's not play either of our catchers of the future at all, even though Caro, like I think if Teel came back and you put Caro in AAA, no one would be like, why are they abandoning the future? It'd be more like, this guy's clearly struggling, let's get him right. It's just like, if Teal's out and you are saying Caro can't fix what's going on up here, let's send him down. Now you're just playing placeholders in the spot. So Romo's pretty young, and obviously was a former second-round pick or 35th overall pick, comp round guy. You're not really moving forward to what your long-term picture is with that spot. So it's weird to make a move based on production when it's still going to be like, we need to move to our future. We're going to try to get Caro right. And that's really the reason why your production is where it is that he's not hitting, he's not turning around fastballs right now. And Teel doesn't have a definitive date for a rehab assignment just yet, because his running's still not 100%. So it's talking about this problem without really doing something that's going to meaningfully address the problem. At the same time, like on paper, Reese McGuire has not played well, and Romo has played well in AAA. Give him a shot. Why not? Why not churn through guys? Why not churn through options? It's just a little bit like going back to Jim's original headline was Reese McGuire, of like they signed him for some reason. It's a lot harder to figure out what the reason is when I know he's had hot streaks and other stops, but as someone who watched Reese McGuire in 2022, watched him now, same guy can walk through the door. Yeah, there's not all the pop. The offense is not really there. He does little things right behind the plate. I thought you were cool with this, and that's why you brought him on. Did you see something wildly out of what your expectations were to pull the ripcord after a month, more or less? Kind of, I can't say, but it's not an unjustifiable move. It's just, it's not really going to, it's not what's going to change this is Edgar Caro to start hitting at this point, because nothing else is really beyond your control, or nothing else is really within your control in terms of like Teel coming back, or the backup catchers not being backup catchers.
Well, even going back to spring training, I think this what leads to some of the confusion is, what was Corey Lee doing wrong to not be the White Sox backup catcher? Why did you feel like, as the White Sox, you need to spend more than $1 million to sign Reese McGuire to bring him into the fold and then go through the whole waiver process, the DFA process for Corey Lee, and hoping that he sneaks through and he gets the Charlotte Knights. I know Corey Lee has not been playing well for Charlotte. Like, the White Sox catchers are just overall not playing all that well. But I feel like that also leads to some of the confusion from a White Sox fan perspective, James, of like, this team feels so dependent now on Kyle Teel. Like, Jim ends up being right. Like, yeah, Kyle Teel is one of the most valuable players in this White Sox team because this team just feels like it's really lost to the catcher position without Kyle Teel.
Yeah, like to your point, it seems like the one through line for what they want for the backup catcher spot is not Corey Lee. And yeah, I was not like particularly swayed by Corey having like a big spring training offensively. I thought he was going to have like, kind of Reese McGuire shaped offense, probably a little bit more raw pop in terms of what he does, but like has been someone who chases a lot and has swing and miss issues. And he's not as good as a framer as Reese McGuire, but he's also not as bad as like Edgar Caro. And the one thing that Corey Lee would do is suppress the running game. Yeah. So with what you're kind of shuffling through, like I thought it was probably certainly fine to go with him during this window without Kyle Teel, both in terms of good relationship with the pitching staff, what he can bring from a running game prevention standpoint, and probably would have walked into the homer or two because he's got that kind of juice a bit more than what you had. I guess it's preferable to try new things when what you had was not like necessarily satisfactory, but it does seem like a lot of motion for something that's hasn't really amounted to much in terms of what they've done as an alternative. But yeah, I think Jim was right on it because the way they've talked about Kyle Teel, both offensively and defensively, like they clearly view that he has, especially like since he's been out, in terms of like talking about Edgar really doesn't have the margin of error to start chasing the way he did, in the first couple of months. I think he's pared it back a little bit. You've seen him taking some walks recently, but also feeling like Kyle Teel just from a physical standpoint had so much more framing potential. That's something you got from like talking to Walker McKinnon about it. Yeah, I think Kyle Teel being not a franchise player, but like clearly like a huge part of the core is something that's been, really reiterated through this whole process. And I'm pro guys playing in WBC. I think it's fun. I think like it's something they should get the opportunity to do. I don't think like the ideas of teams like hoarding them as like these protected assets, not letting them play baseball is what I'm trying to endorse. At the same time, if he was this important, why did they let him play in the WBC? I bet they clearly think about that a little bit now that he's missed a month. It's cool that he was there. Certainly was a big thing for Sam Antonacci as well. Yeah. Freak things this can happen all the time. Kyle's a high effort player, but Kyle Teel being a huge face of the franchise is weird that we are feeling that more in his absence than even watching him play very well last season, obviously.
Yeah, and we're still not going to see Kyle Teel until now the month of May, as he is going to miss the complete first month of the 2026 season. And we're still waiting, as James mentioned, on when the rehab stint will start for Kyle Teel. So hopefully something happens with Drew Romo and Edgar Caro to find a hot streak to help with the catcher production. Romo did appear in the last two games. He went 0 for 3 with 2 walks and a strikeout. Someone else that got...
Threw out a runner.
And yep, he did that as well. Someone that got beat up a little bit on this weekend is Jordan Leasure. Leasure has now allowed 10 earned runs this season in 13 1/3 innings pitched. However, if you really break down the game log for Jordan Leasure, and before these last 3 outings, he had 5 straight scoreless outings from April 5th to April 16th. It's just that in his last 6 outings, it's 7 walks to only 5 strikeouts. Is the lack of control and living in the strike zone, is that the biggest factor right now, James, with Jordan Leasure's struggles, or is there something else that's hurting his game?
I mean, you could say that because that's always true. But there's also like, those are kind of long-term limitations for him. He's probably going to be like a 10+% walk guy his whole career. He's going to be very homer prone. It's simply just because like he does not. Everything is about is hacking the top of the zone with his fastball, and he does just not generate ground balls. He's like a swing and miss guy, or fly out. So you're never going to see like an Aaron Bummer outing from Jordan Leasure where it's like, oh, he got five top balls, and I don't know how, but they scored 2 runs. I don't like. I mean, it's hard to say like you can't do this because like it's the nature of relieving, especially like a leverage guy. I don't like him coming in traffic because like there's always like an extra base run is going to come from like the level of walk that he has to him, and he's so reliant on getting slider chase that it's not very. You want to give him a clean inning. He needs that margin for error. He's not someone who can work in tight spaces very easily with the way his game works. That said, like he's getting less whiff on his fastball in a way that like certainly is weird. He's getting really damaged on his slider in a way that seems a little fluky because like the miss and the chase on it are both there the way his norms are. His fastball has always been a little vulnerable just because like his slot's so over the top that like people are like super geared up. Like I know it's going to be the top of the zone. I'm trying to get on top of it a bit. The velo hasn't like fallen off in some big way where I'm like, or the action's fallen off in some big way where I think his fastball is like not working, but he's just like a guy where like if something's a little off, you can certainly see these spurts on him. I think he'll ultimately be okay or normalized to some degree, and I think certainly the Sox have like a lot of confidence in him to kind of be like a solid big leaguer based on what he did last season. I think that the barriers to him becoming like super locked in 8th inning guy, or certainly something beyond that, or something we're seeing him run into like time and again, where it just seems like the ceiling that a Grant Taylor offers of being like an all-star level reliever or being someone who can like you are comfortable seeing close there. Until I see that splitter more, which he showed in Kansas City and looked great. It's something he was working on for a while. You just have vulnerability to lefties, you have chase dependence, you have walk stuff where it's like bad outings can clump on him and having him try to work through like a bases loaded jam. These are just things that are really hard to see him like navigating well, even though like man, that slider really gets a lot of miss rates, and it's hard to really give up on a guy who throws 96 and gets like near 40% whiff on a slider against major league hitters. The tools are obviously there for like a useful major league reliever. It's just so many things can like are just if they're just a little bit off, like an inning could go haywire on him. That make me wonder like what's the ceiling beyond like what he did in the second half last year, and how are we going to get him to be more reliably what he was like in the second half last year? That I don't have the answer for. So a long way to say I don't really know, but the main thing I would just be like I would love to see the third pitch more. It looked good. It seems like it's a big another thing you can maybe not use in the zone. A splitter is not like a strike pitch, but just like more weapons that get him out of the mindset of like just having to throw the perfect slider over and over again to get through an inning. I don't know.
No,
it's a pickle.
You bring up really good points, and maybe Leisure's not a guy you want to use in the 10th inning moving forward from a White Sox perspective, but even Sir Anthony Dominguez struggled in the 10th inning on Sunday against Washington, allowing 2 runs. The White Sox don't have a lot of options right now in the bullpen because they are starting to use Ryan Hudson as an opener, and it's worked. And I wonder, James, moving forward, since the White Sox are big fans of using the opener, and Sean Burke pitched really well on Sunday, career high in innings for him. So when you see Hudson pitch a scoreless first inning, you see how Burke picks up the load in the second, and it's a scoreless outing for the White Sox through 9 innings. The strategy has been working for them. So moving forward, is Hudson the guy that opens for the White Sox when they're facing a lineup like Washington that's a little bit lefty heavy? And is it still Grant Taylor for the lineups that are righty heavy?
So they are like 2 different breeds of opener for sure. Because like the White Sox don't have like, well, I guess now they have Noah Schultz, but they haven't used an opener for Noah Schultz. And then there's Anthony Kay, but like they don't have seemingly like the right-handed version of Hudson. Hudson is like he's like a testament to why they obsess over arm slot. He's this low slot lefty. He's throwing 91. I mean, his fastball is just like tearing through people right now. He looks a lot better than when they had him late last season. He's been kind of good outright, but just such a different look than Burke, who's going to come over and be like an over-the-top righty. So he's the kind of opener of like, hey, we're going to throw you the exact opposite thing that you're otherwise building your lineup for type of opener that, that was the way it kind of really started with the Rays. Whereas Grant Taylor is of the mindset of like, hey, we're just going to take one of your times that your top of your order comes up and we're going to hang a 0 on it to start the game. And then we're going to move from there, which is like, I mean, include Sir Anthony Dominguez in the conversation. Here's our best reliever and he's going to get us a 0 and get us rolling. Whereas like, I don't know if they necessarily have like a right-hand equivalent of like, here's a low slot righty who will be weird before you face, like, that would be like Penn Murphy would be like the type of guy who opens for Noah Schultz or Anthony Kay type of thing. Like, here's just like kind of a weird guy to throw you off before your lineup that's supposed to face righties. But yeah, I think Hudson certainly is in that bucket a little bit. I wonder if like a little bit, if he continues to be really good, does he just move into like leverage work at some point? I think Sean Newcomb's been solid where maybe you don't really have to consider that in the same way you would if he was struggling. But he's been kind of, I wonder if like this is kind of emerging because like Hudson's been a little bit better than that, that Tyler Gilbert mode of last season where let's have this like low slot lefty open for a couple righties. I think right now it's fitting, but like if he keeps having success, does he just move into leverage later in the game since you have so much churn going on in this bullpen where, Tyler Davis, Osvaldo Bido, like all these guys who have been here less a week where you're not really sure like what their place is long term. Whereas I think like Hudson's kind of starting to earn himself some staying power right now.
Well, you'll be able to read more features from James on SoxMachine.com as the White Sox continue their homestand with the Los Angeles Angels visiting. Derek Showman, the White Sox hitting coach, had a lot to say. So even more from James coming from right field. You'll be able to read that work on SoxMachine.com. And James, make sure you hop over to the Angels dugout and personally thank Mike Trout for carrying your fantasy baseball team this week.
4-0, baby.
After this weekend series, the Chicago White Sox have wrapped up their first month of the regular season. They are currently 11-17, as I mentioned in the intro. And helping me recap the first month of the 26th season, joining me is Sox Machine's managing editor. It's Jim Margalus. And Jim, they got to double-digit wins. They got to 11. A bit surprising, they're tied for last with the Kansas City Royals in the division, but they're just 3.5 games back out of first place. They're only a game back of the Minnesota Twins for third place in the division. So how would you sum up the first month of this season for the White Sox?
Could be worse, I think would be the way to call it based on one, how they started. Two, the fact that Shane Smith is currently in AAA. If you told me that before the season, I'd say like, oh, they're in hell. And it turns out that Noah Schultz is a pretty good replacement spot for spot. So that helps. And then you have the outfield, which is missing Austin Hayes. Luis Angel Acuna has not figured it out. Sam Antonacci is part of the mix. You have Brooks Baldwin, who has been out the whole season. He was supposed to be part of that as well in center field. They've been patching, basically spot for spot every single game or every single series at the very least. And it looks like a mess sometimes. And so when you see these huge red flags and the fact that the bullpen hasn't quite lived up to expectations either, you could see it being another, single digit month. And, depending on how you count it, baseball month or, calendar months worth of days or, end of April. They're still not out of the woods entirely for it to be like a good April. But I think for, 1 month of baseball in the books, the fact that their record looks like an ordinary bad team's record and not one of the worst teams in baseball or worst teams ever record, I think is at least a step in the right direction. Just a matter of now, one, that's very low bar. And then two, just can they actually, get some guys back, particularly Kyle Teel. I think if you get Teel and Shane Smith looking like a number 3, number 4 starter. That probably helps us quite a bit versus right now with catchers being a mess and everything else. Kind of feels like they're hanging on by a thread.
Yeah, I agree with you that it could be a lot worse. I could also hear podcast listeners say it could be a lot better. And I think the last 9 games really sums up on how this 2026 season has started for the White Sox. There are some days where it's like, wow, it feels really good to be rooting for the White Sox. It looks like this ship is finally turning into the right direction. And just like this last weekend, the last 2 losses happened in extra innings. And it's like, oh, if the White Sox just got a key hit here with runners in scoring position, if they're not 1 for 12, if they're 2 for 12 with runners in scoring position, maybe they win on Saturday. And if they could just scored 1 run over 9 innings against the Nationals, they would have won on Sunday. So this record could be closer to 500, maybe even above 500 with some of the games they have blown in the first 28 games of the year. But I also agree with you, Jim, on the same point that it could be better. Yeah, they could easily be like, 6-22 to start this season. And it's kind of in the middle at 11 wins with what they have currently on the roster. And I think what helps with the White Sox being 11-17 and why they are interesting to those outside of Chicago is Munetaka Murakami and his first month of the season already at 11 home runs. And it's kind of fun to calculate his on-pace metrics, Jim, for the rest of the season because he has played every single game. So really easy. Just take his current numbers, divide it by 28, take that percentage, times it by 162. There you go, his on-base numbers. So I ask you, Jim, out of these 4 options, which on-base metric is most achievable for Munetaka Murakami? 64 home runs, 115 RBIs, 127 walks, or 237 strikeouts?
I'm going to be a wet blanket and start with 237 strikeouts just because we've seen that before. We've seen that before from moderately productive hitters. Like Mark Reynolds holds the record for 223. Adam Dunn would have broken it had the White Sox not pulled off of his playing time that year a little bit. I think they kind of, at the end, managed it a little bit so he wouldn't get the record, but he had 222. But like Dunn was fine that season. He was average for a DH that year. Mark Reynolds, the year that he set the strikeout record, he had 127 OPS plus. So that's a case where 237, you expect he's not going to play every day, probably comes down to that 220 range. And so like we've seen that before from decent to good hitters, good power hitters. So that's why I say 237 and not necessarily a bad thing or like everything is going to collapse. Just more of a matter of there's a lot of swing and miss in this game. I would say like incorporating the other elements, 127 walks seems like a lot, but he doesn't swing it much out of the zone. Like his plate discipline is very impressive. And I think as long as he has that kind of home run power and like the 113, 114 mile per hour home run power that just makes everybody in the ballpark say like, oh, this is real and scary. Like he will get treated with a certain amount of respect that allows him to draw the walks if he just swings at nothing. And again, that's a kind of player type we've seen before, whether it's Dunn, whether it's Joey Gallo. So wouldn't rule that out, for a 162 game pace that he's currently on. Then probably 115 RBIs, then probably 64 homers, just because, how hard it is to hit 60 homers in a season. There are easier ways to get to 115 RBIs, even if you hit like 50 homers or something like that. So ends up with the ugly home run to RBI ratio that I've talked about before. But given the walks, given the just amount that he's doing with the balls that he's putting in play that are going over the fence, the home run to fly ball rate is great. Like, yeah, I think you take that overall.
There's a part of me that's like, obviously 64 home runs is the most achievable out of these 4. Nobody in White Sox history's hit 50. So to hit 60 would be like crushing the record and bypassing it. I am hoping that you are wrong about the strikeouts, but I think I agree with you that 237 strikeouts is probably most achievable. but I am going to pick 115 RBIs for Munetaka Murakami. I think at some point this season, he's going to figure it out and really cut down that strikeout rate where it's well above 30% right now, that hopefully in a couple months, he gets that strikeout rate around 20%. But at the same time, still hitting for power, just with more guys on base and really cashing in. There are some at-bats for Murakami that he does have runners in scoring position. He's just not taking advantage of that opportunity, and he's not cashing in for the White Sox. So while he does have a pretty ugly home run to RBI ratio, as you mentioned, Jim, I do think that I think the 115 RBIs is most achievable out of these four, especially the rate that he's hitting home runs right now for the White Sox. So listeners, in the comments section on the SoxMachine.com podcast page, let us know in the comments section which one you think is most achievable for Munetaka Murakami for the rest of the year. 64 home runs, 115 RBIs, 127 walks, or 237 strikeouts. So for Murakami, let's talk about a topic that we were concerned about all off season, and that is the White Sox outfield. So after a month of watching this outfield, Jim, how are you feeling about the White Sox outfield?
Not good. Feels like they're barely able to put one together at times. A lot of infielders playing out there. Austin Hayes is able to stabilize the outfield. It's not great that he's so experienced with hamstring pulls that he knows how to mitigate it when he feels a grab on him to where he's able to come back. But what he showed early seems like he should be able to help. I don't think Andrew Benintendi is dead yet, but he's not like a left fielder you want out there necessarily. Like Sam Antonacci, I think, has been fine in left field early on, and I think he's more or less showing what you think he's going to show at the plate in his first weeks. So that's okay, but just the center field plan, Luis Angel Acuna hitting like everything on the ground is a real problem, and he's been shaky in center field when it comes to like the high fly reads. Yeah, I'm not sure if it's oddly or if it's just makes sense kind of counterintuitively when you think about it a little bit, is that he looks good on the line drives, the ones where he has to make a hard break. Like he seems like he tracks those down pretty well, and you see the closing speed. It seems like the high flies are the ones where he dances with a little bit, and you see the kind of family circus like route of just kind of running around circles until he catches it like around stomach level. That makes you not necessarily the most confident what he's doing out there. I think Derek Hill has been what you thought in terms of like a fifth outfielder who is kind of like a third to fourth outfielder at this point. I guess Tristan Peters, we'll say like he's been okay. Couple big hits in late/extra innings. Looks okay in center field. Not hitting for a ton of power. He kind of bunts more than I want him to, but he's at least providing a professional at bat, and I think providing some of the surest actions in the outfield. So I think he's been okay for somebody who was off the radar in spring training and made the roster kind of by surprise. But yeah, certainly need Austin Hayes back to round down the amount of guys who are out of position and stretched out, whether offensively or defensively. And then I guess we'll reevaluate when he gets a week or so under his feet, and hopefully he's able to run at full speed and play defense basically all the time and go from there.
Now, moving over to the pitching side for the White Sox, how are you feeling about the starting pitching unit, Jim?
Better now that Noah Schultz is here and his stuff plays. If you told me that Schultz would be in the rotation by the end of April, I'd say I hope it was that he earned it, and I hope it's not because there's a total emergency. And no, he looked awesome at Charlotte, and he's looked better and better in terms of like his arsenal rounding together with every start in the majors. So yeah, that's cool. And then you have Sean Burke, I think, demonstrating some of the best command he's shown his last two times out, especially with the curveball. Davis Martin is getting outs, and I think with him, his arsenal is so diverse and so shape-shifting that I don't think you necessarily count on him to do anything the same way twice or do anything the same way month to month, because the book changes and he changes. if he's not going to be a strikeout guy, and his strikeouts are up this year, but if he's not going to be somebody who gets a strikeout an inning, and he relies on suppressing BABIP, and he relies on just quick innings, basically just efficiency, then he's got to throw innings. He's got to get outs. And so far he's getting outs, and that looks great. Eric Fetty, I think, is holding serve, like not necessarily bringing back memories of 2024 altogether, but like he's been fine. So you have like 4 spots there, and just the 5th spot's kind of a mess right now with Anthony Kay, his transition not going all that smoothly, and Smith being a project. Jonathan Cannon on the injured list. That spot looks a little bit iffy right now, but I think most teams don't know exactly what they're getting from the 5th starter. So that you can more or less take. It's just, you get to the point of like, oh, Tanner McDougal, his hamstring grabbing a little bit. His last time out, do they have that 6th starter on deck should somebody get hurt? And right now it's, might be Shane Smith coming back if need be, and just trying to, fix the plane in the air if he's still not all the way resolved in Charlotte. But overall, I would say thumbs up, arrows pointing up. Enough guys doing what they need to be doing in order to feel like this should hold together for a little bit.
It'd be great if Shane Smith can bounce back and be better than serviceable. I don't know if he can regain his old form. If he can regain his old form, that would be another boost to the starting pitching rotation, because Davis Martin, the way that he started this season after 5 starts, is a godsend, Jim, especially in light with Shane Smith being demoted to AAA. Somebody needed to step up and help lead this rotation, and Davis Martin has done that. In his first 5 starts, Sean Burke has been surprising me, especially with how well he threw on Sunday. If you don't want earned run average, Davis Martin's FIP is 3.09. Sean Burke's FIP is 4.02. That's very serviceable in the starting rotation. And if Noah Schultz can maintain this type of stuff, obviously it'd be great if he could, cut down on the walks, but he's learning. It's only 3 starts in the major leagues. I am a bit worried, Jim, when it comes to Eric Fetty, that there's going to be the Matt Latos effect. And this thing goes sideways fast.
But a nicer guy.
Anthony Kay, if this doesn't work, like maybe he can be the Mike Vassell of this bullpen, and you push him into the bullpen and be a swing guy. Like, I know he won't like that because he's not a big fan of somebody opening up games for him right now. But in 5 appearances, his FIP is 6.53. His earned run average is over 5. Like, the White Sox need more out of him. So I'm with you that the starting rotation can get better, but at least in the next couple of weeks, punch a hole through the nearest wooden object, podcast listeners. The White Sox do not need any injuries to their starting rotation right now, as some of the guys are trying to ramp up down in Charlotte. And Hagen Smith had a difficult start, right, in his last time out for the Knights, Jim?
Yes.
Yeah. So if it's one of the Smiths that's going to be coming up if there is a need for the White Sox in the starting rotation. I'm hoping that it's because they're joining the rotation, replacing like an Anthony Kay or an Eric Fetty, and that's another boost in productivity for the starting rotation. But you do bring up a good point. If there's an injury the next couple of weeks, it could be difficult on the starting front for the White Sox.
Yeah, I just think with Eric Fetty, basically every start that he gives you is a gift.
Sure.
And the fact that he's fine is plus. Like, they didn't pay him a whole lot. So you're basically looking at him as a protective layer for the Schultz, McDougal, Hagen Smith trio. And I think he's done that part.
And I think that's the reason they signed him, right? I thought that was the point.
Yeah. But given just how poorly he pitched last year, it wasn't necessarily the safest bet. And right now he's providing good value.
If someone in the rotation needs to be replaced because of productivity reasons, I think that would be Anthony Kay being pushed back into the bullpen and still have someone open for Eric Fetty. But I would still have Fetty part of pitching every 5th day, if that makes sense, Jim. Like, I would go, Fetty's fine, Kay's probably the one at risk. Now, speaking of the bullpen, and that's the final unit we'll talk about as far as this month recap, How are you feeling about the White Sox bullpen, Jim? Because they spent quite a bit of resources this offseason in trying to improve this unit.
I would say current performance, not good. I still think there's a way it can shape into something better. I think Grant Taylor has been great by and large, especially for the amount of roles they've used him in, that he's been very versatile. He's been able to bounce back both in terms of like recovery, but also like when he's had wobblier outings, like it hasn't carried over. He's been pretty slump proof thus far, knock on wood. So that's the most important guy in the bullpen, and he's holding up thus far. So that's a good place to start. But after him, it gets pretty iffy. I think Sir Anthony Dominguez has been showing why he's been limited to setup, right-handed oriented relief work, just because, stuff is vulnerable to lefties still. He was impressive against James Wood. Like, that was a great strikeout. But then he falls behind 3-1, gives up a challenge homer fastball on 95. And you can see like, oh yeah, it's still very sketchy when he's facing a lefty in high leverage. The walks are there, the strikeouts are there. It's an adventure. And so I think that's why he closed some and he did okay. And I think he's probably dynamic enough to where, like, I don't necessarily say it's a mentality thing or he can't handle closing. I think it's just the stuff is erratic enough to where sometimes it flops at the worst possible moment, or it can't be hidden, or somebody can't come in to finish an inning for him. It's got to be him or bust. So that's why I think you're seeing some of the strain there. I think probably the biggest disappointment is Jordan Leasure so far. The home runs coming back. That hurts a bit because like Jordan Hicks has not looked, he's had some good innings, but then like he looks like he doesn't necessarily have great stuff the second inning, or maybe like pitching on back-to-back days doesn't look as sharp. So he's having a hard time like building momentum. They've changed out so many other guys in the other spots. Like Brian Hudson, I think, is maybe the best of the guys left over. And but like Sean Newcomb has been another guy who's, been pushing in different roles and been okay, but not necessarily what they've wanted, what they paid him for. So yeah, it's kind of a mess right now. I think there is a way that they can find an order to it. It's just while they figure it out, like it's kind of iffy. And I think like, I'm curious when you get to Charlotte, you have Wickelman Gonzalez who's pitching pretty well. You have Ben Peoples who's pitching fairly well down there. So they still have a few more arms they can shuffle through to find an order. So that's why I'm not hitting like the panic button yet. And certainly what we saw last year was worse. So it's again, the low bar, very easy to clear, makes it hard to tell like what's better from what's still terrible. But I would say it's more of a 3/4 poll conversation when they get to 40 games. That's like another 2 weeks from now. What kind of hierarchy do they have?
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel about like the last three guys in the bullpen, the back end of the bullpen? Does it feel like Will Venable has good options? And if they don't, then like, yeah, that's where the money should have helped, and so far has not.
I don't think this is a hot take, but my take on the White Sox bullpen, especially in particular with Grant Taylor, is going to come with some extra sauce at the White Sox front office. You guys need to make up your mind. I think he has the stuff maybe not to be exactly like Mason Miller, but he can be elite reliever. And if there's any part of you that does not believe that Grant Taylor his shoulder is never going to hold up every fifth day to take the ball and pitch 5 innings, just make him an elite reliever. Like the opener idea and having him pitch the first 2 innings, I'm not against that idea if you want to build him up to be a starting pitcher at some point. But if that's not going to happen, he is your best high leverage guy. Use your best high leverage guy when you need him for the highest of leverages and develop him that way. And if he's electric over the next couple of months, and if you don't think that he's ever going to be more than a closer type for you, and if a team calls and makes an offer you can't refuse in a trade because they think that he's going to be the next Mason Miller, then go that route. or you keep him because then you have Mason Miller at home. And now you have an electric reliever that can shut down other teams when you really need them in the 7th, 8th, or 9th inning. I just think moving forward to the next month or two for the White Sox, we talked about it with James with the opener strategy. Find another right-handed pitcher to open games for the White Sox. I'd feel a lot more comfortable, and I'm sure Will Venable would too, Jim, if he knew that he had Grant Taylor to help protect leads in the 7th through 9th innings.
Yeah, I don't think that's necessarily a hot take just because I think it's a sound take. I think a hot take is if you saw more guys in this weird amorphous role doing this, then you might say why can't Grant Taylor be like all those other pitchers who open and then close and have the best stuff in their bullpen? But in this case, there's no other use case like this to where he's throwing 2 innings opening for a guy who you're hoping can hold it through 6, and then you're left with 3 innings to cover without your best arm. And then you have him, having lights out stuff, but still not being the closer. And, that gets a little bit weird when it comes to just what she signs for Anthony Dominguez for, but then also the fact that saves get paid in arbitration. So if they're trying to delay that, perhaps that's another reason why they're trying to, have him pitch all these roles.
Years away though, right? With
yeah,
Grant
but
Taylor.
It does add up. I think it's the case with Taylor. If you're making the closer, then he's got to close, or it makes it very easy to tell, you're avoiding saves. If he's should be pitching the 9th inning and is not, it makes it very easy to tell. So I think he's young enough, his career is early enough where I'm not all the way down that road yet, but the further they hold off on either building him up and stretching him out or committing him to being, helping solidify the bullpen, because it does nobody else any favors. It bums out the rest of your team if you blow late inning leads.
Right.
And if you're, so it's a case where, when they signed Dominguez, they thought, all right, we're going to be holding more leads. And you saw why everybody wanted to do that. So if you have a weapon who can help you do that, and he's not available because he either opened the game or he opened the day before and pitched 2 innings, he's not available, then it just gets weird. You're burn the candle at both ends, but one end is kind of pointless in terms of, he's not going to be the opener on a good team. He's either going to be a starter on a good team, or he's going to be the closer on a good team with what he throws and how wide ranging his arsenal is. So, yeah, I think I'm with you that I would just like a better explanation for it. I think if nothing else, it's just been feeling like he's misused, and I can understand that they want him to be able to throw 2 innings, and I don't see why he can't do that in the later innings and have the same use case. I think maybe the only reason is it's unpredictable. If you try to hold him for 2 innings and you're waiting for that 2 inning appearance, does he accumulate rust? And then it gets weird trying to maintain his workload while the games he can impact don't matter, versus if he's opening, he is pitching innings that matter because it's scoreless or it's narrow lead, but still so much can be done in the later innings after he leaves the game that can overwrite it and make it feel kind of pointless.
Yeah, and one of those is if Grant Taylor opens for 2 innings and then Anthony Kay follows up and Kay gives up 3 runs over 3 innings, then what was the point? Right? That's why I feel call up Winkelman Gonzalez. Winkelman could be your opener. Have him go an inning. Have Anthony Kay come in and try to get at least 4 innings for you. And if your offense is slugging because you're facing their team's number 4, number 5 starting pitcher, and you have a lead, even if it's a wacky game 7-5, let's say hypothetically, but you're going in the 8th inning and you got Grant Taylor and Sir Anthony Dominguez, I feel a lot more comfortable about the White Sox chances of clinching that game. No matter how you got there, a win is a win. I just don't want them to burn Grant Taylor's innings in a series if they're limited. I guess at this point, Jim, moving forward, if you could only use him twice in a series, or if you only get 2 innings every series of Grant Taylor because of just his shoulder, 1 inning, 2 games, he could still be an impact reliever for you to help close out tight games. And the White Sox, In the first 28 games, I've been playing some tight games, Jim.
Yeah, it's what every other team does with an arm like this. One way or another, you keep it consistent versus, having him open. Having him serve the same role as Brian Hudson is strange when you put it that way.
Yeah, it sure does. And you also signed Sean Newcomb to kind of, I don't know. I guess, in a way, podcast listeners, Grant Taylor, in my opinion, is too good to be an opener. If you're not going to allow him to push to 3 or 4 innings, if there are people within the White Sox organization that do not think he can hold up being a starter, then let's scrap that idea and let him be an elite reliever that still has a lot of value for the White Sox and who knows, maybe other MLB teams if they come calling. But that's the first month of the season for the White Sox. They're 11-17. They continue their homestand against the Angels this upcoming week. We'll have our midweek podcast episode for you guys as well. A lot more content coming on SoxMachine.com in written form, so make sure that you do visit the website every single day. But thank you so much for listening to this edition of the Sox Machine Podcast. If you just discovered the Sox Machine Podcast, you can subscribe to the show wherever you listen to podcasts, such as Spotify and Apple Music. Check out our videos as well. We've been putting up more full-length videos, short-form videos, and of course our YouTube shorts as well of the interviews from right field with James now having a fancy camera in tow. You can check out our videos and subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/SoxMachine. Follow us on social media. We're on all the social media platforms at Sox Machine. Follow James at JR Fegan. You can follow me at SoxMachine_Josh. If you want full access to all of our coverage of the Chicago White Sox, Major League Baseball, and the upcoming Major League Baseball draft, sign up to become a Sox Machine subscriber at SoxMachine.com/products. Monthly plans start at $5. That gets you the ad-free version of both the podcast and the website. Unlocks the comment section for you as well. We have additional tiers of support, including some spots open in our Veterans Committee, which then you'll be part of our group chat. Again, congratulations to one of our VC members, Kyle, as he just got engaged in Spain. So congratulations to Kyle.
Congratulations.
Very exciting news. And yeah, if you want to be part of Sox Machine's Veterans Committee or be helping support us to keep the lights on and continue our coverage of the Chicago White Sox, go to SoxMachine.com/products and sign up today. The Sox Machine Podcast is a production of SoxMachine.com. You're for all things Chicago White Sox baseball and part of the Blue Wire Podcast Network. Alongside Jim Margalus and James Fegan, I'm Josh Nelson. Thanks for listening and watching.